I chose to research Laurel, Thatcher, Ulrich, and her perspective in A Midwife's Tale. Laurel Thatcher Ulrich is a historian and Pulitzer Prize-winning author of A Midwife's Tale. She was born July 11th, 1938, grew up in Sugar City, Idaho, experienced a traditional upbringing, and her parents encouraged all their children to pursue their education. She was also raised in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and remains an active member. She graduated at the top of her class at the University of Utah in 1960, where she majored in English. She and her husband, Gail Ulrich, moved to Boston in 1960 for him to get his PhD at MIT. They later moved to New Hampshire, where Gail became a professor at the University of New Hampshire. In 1971, she received her MA in English from Simmons College, and during this time, Ulrich gave birth to 5 children, and she completed her PhD in history at the University of New Hampshire. Her background is in English, especially early New England literature. She studied this at both the undergrad and graduate level. This helped her to have a strong understanding for all things New England. The knowledge also helped her feel comfortable right away, even though she was geographically an outsider when she and her husband moved to the Boston area in 1960. In the early 1960s and 70s, she became involved with a group of Mormon feminist writers in Boston through her association with the church. These feminist friends played an important role in her historical approach. She eventually made a transition from English to history in her studies, and had never previously taken a history course when she enrolled in the doctoral program at the University of New Hampshire. She credits Charles Clark and Derek Ruttman for training in writing history and in social history that she received. They were her mentors that nurtured her interest in writing about ordinary people. The Women's Studies program at UNH also sparked her interest in women's issues and social history. She also says her role as a wife and mother influenced her writing interest and perspective. It helped her to gain insight and value the things ordinary women did. Well-behaved women seldom make history. Her most famous quote came from her first scholarly article and reflects the women she writes about. This quote later becomes the basis and title for a book in 2008. Ulrich also explores and pieces together often limited records. She relies on artifacts and objects which are referred to as material culture as historical evidence. These are things such as household objects, furniture, quilts, or diaries. She uses these items to try to understand the lives of ordinary people such as Martha. Now for analysis of A Midwife's Tale. After her first book, Good Wives, was published in 1982, she began looking for next project to work on. She came across these 2 volumes of Martha's diary, kind of on accident while doing research at the Maine State Library. She was surprised by the size and the extent of the diaries and recognized their rarity and realized she wanted to use them as a primary source. She had decided to analyze the daily entries and merge this information with Martha's diary and other from Martha's diary and with other sources to create a social history about northern New England in the period. She is attempting to understand the lives of women in the late 18th and early 19th centuries, and also what society in northern New England was like in the late 18th and early 19th century, and also how women in their roles at the time helped to make up the fabric of ordinary society. She takes on quite a large scope in this work and discusses a wide range of topics and themes throughout Martha's diary in greater detail. She tries to fill in the gaps and gives us background information on what is going on in the diary itself so that we may gain a better understanding and a fuller picture of the time period, as well as Martha's experiences as a midwife. She is able to present this information due to her extensive research that she did while writing this book. Other historians dismissed Martha's diary as being trivial and mundane. Ulrich believed, however, that the real power and value of the diaries was in their dailiness and the repetitiousness of the dailiness. And she relied on the diary's strength, too, and how steady it was, to create a narrative about the women of this time, and she looked at their lives, their circumstances, roles, and responsibilities in families, communities, and society. Her approach seems to be from the bottom up, which means she looks at ordinary people in their everyday lives and interprets what this tells us about the society and history of a particular time period. She sees significance in details of ordinary everyday life and values what this reveals to us about history. Through her research, she discusses themes such as economics, family economy, medical care, and obstetrics, etc. as well. She uses a variety of sources in A Midwife's Tale. She uses other primary sources like Hollowell Town and Vital Records, Augusta Town Records, Kennebec County Court Records, etc. She also uses Henry Sewell's diary, which overlaps with Martha's because it was from the same time period, and she compares Sewell's diary with Martha's to see what was similar and different between the two. Ulrich also uses secondary sources to bring the period to life, and these are two early histories of Augusta written by Charles Nash and James North. Nash and North both acknowledge Martha's diary in their work, but deem most of it unimportant. Ulrich, however, found importance in every aspect of the diary. In chapters 1 and 5, she refers to secondary sources that provided her with info on the history of medical practices of the period. And she also used secondary sources to portray a fuller picture of the role of midwives in the history of women as healers. Some patterns in Martha's diary. When Ulrich first discovered the diaries, she realized she had to find patterns and organize the information she had encountered. And some patterns that she had found are midwifery or medical care being given, family economic activities, social interactions, and in finding these patterns as well as others, she was able to formulate questions such as, why does Martha choose to keep a daily record of her activities? What was Martha's level of education and how did she achieve this? What positions did midwives have in the community? And so forth. Ulrich tackles the issue of women's invisible roles in their community and how a patriarchal organization of society leaves them out of the picture. She concludes that without the diary, her, Martha's, biography would be little more than a succession of dates, and that outside her own diary, Martha has no history. Ulrich lets thousands of women leave their mark on their community by recognizing their contributions to society as ordinary but strong frontier women. Ulrich's lasting legacy is that her background helped to shape her approach to the study of New England women's history. Her perspective helps to shed light on the many ways ordinary women have contributed to their communities, and her work, particularly A Midwife's Tale, has added new dimensions to how we understand women and their role in not only the early history of New England, but also in a larger sense to all of history. And here's my sources.